Administrator.
Barbara Cappy, Small Cities in the Dora Corporation.
And Adrian DeLeon, Coos Bay out of town representative.
And for those of you online, a little hard to go clockwise, so I'll just call out your names as I see them. How about Joni?
Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Joni Bedwell, Powers Library.
And Cheryl?
Cheryl Young, Lakeside Public Library Director.
And Christine?
Christine, Band and Library Director, Christine Kingsbury.
And Francis?
Francis Smith, Library Board Member for in the city of Coos Bay.
Okay, so I just want to check and make sure I got everyone online, because I don't see
Amy.
circles here.
I think you missed Amy.
Amy,
Hi,
Yeah.
Amy Bruno from Myrtle Point.
thank you.
And that should be it.
Okay, so next up is agenda changes. Is there anything somebody needs to add? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on, and we next have the approval of minutes from March 28th. And I don't know if any board members need a little time to look through that, or if you done that.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the March 28th meeting. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Francis. I got you. Any opposed?
Sure.
Motion carries and the minutes from March 18th are approved. Next up is old business. One big item, the distribution committee update.
So on behalf of the committee, I'm Haley, and I am representing the library directors on the Coos Library Board's special committee to revise the distribution of funds in the library district. And today I have a report for you. I have
Me to share first.
if you'll do the PDF document first,
Okay.
for the board members that are here, I have these printed and Stacy's going to share on this screen the document. And if you'll go to page 3 of that document, Stacy.
Okay.
So to begin, I am going to give you an update on the consensus reached on what the distribution formula should be moving forward. And then I will give you an update on where we are in determining a transition period to move us to that new method for calculating funds for each library in the district. The formula that we have reached consensus on as a group of directors and within our committee, if applied in 1 year, would cause some pretty severe swings or changes in funding levels for some of our libraries that would seriously impact their ability to operate. And so in an effort to avoid a change like that, and from the recommendations of this Coos Library Board, we have been working on a transition plan that would spread out the effects of the new formula or transitioning to the new formula over the course of 3 or 4 years. So going back to the new formula for calculating a library's funding, we would be using 3-year averages of a variety of different measurables from the libraries to calculate what we are calling a library usage. So as a group of directors and as a committee, we have come up with a set of measurable factors that help us understand how much the library is being utilized, and therefore, thinking logically, that would inform how much a library would need in order to operate in terms of funding. This formula is also based on the percentage of the county population that library has been assigned to serve. county population served was previously approved by the Coos Library Board. A few years ago, there was a new map of the county that apportioned service areas that was approved by the board. The library directors contributed to that process, and so that will be an important piece of the new formula. So the new formula that we are proposing to calculate a library's percentage of the county funding would be based on 75% county usage, and the factors are outlined here in the middle of the page. It includes physical circulation, digital circulation, that is not part of our library to go service, which is provided by the district as a whole, not by individual libraries. Circulation by borrowers outside of their assigned precinct, total check-ins, visits or attendance at the library, and computer use. The majority of these are being pulled, statistics are being pulled from COHA, which is our circulation system that we all use, and also from the reports from the State Library of Oregon. Each library director is required to submit an annual report in the fall. It is certified in January by the state, and that report includes things like our total number of visits to the library and computer use. So 75% of a library's funding would be based on these usage factors, and the remaining 25% of the library's funding would be based on their percentage of our county population served. So does anyone, I'll pause there and see if there's any clarification needed on that proposed formula. I think everybody seems to be in agreement that those are relevant measurables to use, and that including both usage factors and population are important to determining how we fund a library, and also that considering things other than physical circulation are also important to determining how a library is utilized.
I think this might be the time for me to interject a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So Coquille is not in agreement with these factors in the formula. We believe that there are other factors that should be considered. And one of the big factors is programming is something that we believe should be considered. And there's also some of these that we don't believe should be in consideration. So I just wanted to interject that, and we can talk about that more later. But I just want you all to know that this is not, the directors are not 100% in agreement on this 75% formula of factors.
So once the formula is set by the Coos Library Board, then we have the task of starting to use it. And as I said previously, if we were to apply it over the course of one single year, it would cause significant changes in the funding for some libraries in the range of a 40% change, which is not a reasonable expectation for a library to take on. And I think everyone at the table, if you will, on the Coos Library Board and the directors group, we are all in agreement that that is not a reasonable approach to take to this process. So in the last few months, we have been working on a transition plan to move our district to using the new formula. And what has been proposed is that in the first year of this transition, the funding calculation for a library will be calculated with 25% of that funding being determined by this new formula that I just described, but a library is still receiving 75% of its funding at the current level. So you would get 75% of the distribution that you currently get, and 25% of your funding, your distribution would be calculated at the new rate. In the second year, that would change to 50% and 50%. In the third year, those ratios would switch and you would receive 75% of your funding calculated using the new formula, and 25% of the funding would be calculated using the current distribution percentage. We have met multiple times as library directors to discuss this, and several times as a committee as well. And we are getting close to having consensus on this. Today, I'm hoping to hear from the Coos Library Board members about their opinions and how they think we should move forward, whether they are in support of the proposed formula and their thoughts on the transition plan that has been proposed. In our directors meetings, the group has been majority in favor of the transition plan that I have described. The Bandon Library is requesting a different allocation of funds or distribution of funds. The Bandon director has requested that we consider a 35%, 65% split in the first year as opposed to 25, 75%. But the other library directors have voted for the 25, 75 percentage. In addition, as directors, we have had good discussions about the need for clear definitions and guidelines for how a library would calculate and prepare their usage statistics so that we are all on the same page and counting our attendance and our computer use and all of those factors in the same way so that it's an equitable situation. And the directors have requested additional guidance on what the Coos Library Board could or should do in the event of a facility closure or something happening at a library that would impact its ability to provide service, therefore having an effect on its usage numbers. If a library is not able to be open, their usage numbers would be significantly impacted. And so the recommendation from the directors group is to continue to work on that piece of our plan to make sure that those definitions for our factors and a contingency plan is clearly laid out. So we do still have some work to do in those areas. Lastly, I do have an updated version of the previously shared timeline. Which I shared, yeah. And this is another item that we can discuss as the board sees fit. Previously, one of my fellow committee members who cannot be here today had prepared these steps for approving and moving forward with our new formula and implementation plan. And so I'd like to get some feedback today from the board about that plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Thank you. We've heard from Appeal Director Teresa a little bit. I wanted to offer Christine a chance, since Bandon was another one that was mentioned as not in full agreement. So Christine, I don't know if you want to take this opportunity to say a couple things.
Sure, thank you. First of all, we really appreciate all the work that's been done on this allocation. I know it's not an easy process, and I just appreciate everyone's patience and work on it. I personally am in favor of the formula itself. I think that we have come to a good place where it is fair based on statistics and across the board is a good solid formula for us. So I'm very happy to see that for Bandon. We're in a difficult time right now financially. I'm having trouble we're going to be in the hole, the next few years. I totally understand a transition, but we were hoping to try to bump it a little bit higher in the beginning just so that we can get through this transition. I'm looking at possibly laying off a full-time staff member as we're moving through this. So again, I understand the transition. I think if it was possible to give us a little bit more of a bump in the beginning, that would be helpful. But that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you. Board members, comments?
I'd like to hear more from Teresa. Would you define to me what you mean by programming? How many programs held, the attendance and programmings? What
So one reason
What
that,
would you be using as your criteria?
so one reason that programming wasn't being used was because not everybody has a programming space. And so I would entertain that we include offsite programming as well. Like this past year, Myrtle Point did their programming in the park. We do ours in a small and large auditorium. We also do them at the school district. So that's something that tax money for supports, and Coos Bay does a lot of programming outside. They go to the park. And so I'm suggesting that all programming, on-site and off-site, not the amount of programs, but the program attendance.
The attendance itself. Okay, and you don't count that already because
It's not
This-
been included because it's been off-site.
well,
programming.
my memory, which I could be feeble, but my memory of the state report said that if you sponsored the program, doesn't.
Not outside.
No.
But in instances like the Myrtle Point Library's closure, we did seek clarification from the state library that if a library is closed and they are operating in a temporary location, whether that's City Hall or a park, for a program that they would have in an ordinary year held inside their building, they can count that as attendance. That was the direction. And Amy, who's online, could confirm that. I think she communicated with the state library.
Yeah, that's basically what I was told. Since we were closed and there was no way we could do it inside the building, we were doing it on basically in a space that we had leased or borrowed or whatever that was temporarily considered the library. So that's basically what they said. So I think it would apply to like Dora too. Dora has a cooperative agreement to use those buildings that are like part of the fire department or whatever. And I think that it applies to Coquille. I don't know if it only counts if the library is closed, but if the library leases or has an agreement to use a space as the library space, I don't know why that wouldn't count.
Teresa,
So-
were you able to get clarification from Ross on that?
Maybe it's something we need to keep.
I would think another consideration is not necessarily a physical space, but a lot of programs are offered online as well. Would fit in that programming.
Can I also read something from March 18th, 2022? It's about the funding distribution. This is something that we talked about. I've highlighted it here. It's from an email from Haley to the directors. And she said, this is the idea we've been discussing. I believe we can craft a formula that gets each library close to what we receive now. And then number 2 says, to give each library what it received the year prior, same dollar amount or similar distribution percentage, and distribute the increase in revenue using a formula based on these other facets. So at one time, we were talking about whatever we're getting right now, that's what we'll get in the future. And then the new formula would just take care of the increase in property tax each year, rather than reducing what we already get. Because as we all know, the dollar is worth less every single year. So if we just get less, it's not 27%, which we are looking at losing. It's 28% plus inflation. So it's a big deal, whatever Coquille is going to lose, and anybody else who's going to
Well,
lose.
even if you get the exact same amount, you're losing money.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, so at that point in time, just for clarification, I was asking the directors to provide our committee with feedback about one of 2 options. The first option, pursuing a new formula that was calculate the funding on an annual basis, or option B, which is what Teresa described, where a library would receive what they had the year before, new funding calculated using a formula. The committee and the group decided to move forward with option A. So that is the path that we have been going down. Some of the reasons, or the reasons that I recall on the fly for that, is that we don't always receive more money each year. So we could not reliably plan for a library to receive the same amount of funding that they received the year prior. And that's actually why we are in the situation we are now. When the district was formed and the formula was put into place, the Coos Library Board a few years after went to revise the formula, and their plan in the beginning was to do what you described, where a library would get the same amount and anything new would be redistributed. But they ran into the problem that there was nothing new to distribute.
I was on that.
And so, and at that point in time is when they said, well, we will just leave the numbers as they are. So Barbara, you might be able to elaborate on that,
Well,
but
it's
that's
just
my
basically the
understanding.
truth is that there was no money to divide up, so extra money to
Yeah.
divide up.
Yeah, and so that's why we have the percentages I think that we do now.
I was gonna say that's gotta be a big, because you can't count on this amount every year in your taxes, so the percentages is the smart way.
Could you discuss, the pandemic reality or just make a statement?
Sure, we have talked a lot about that in our directors group. We all saw a decrease in usage. Each library was impacted a little bit differently. Overall, all of us saw decreases. And if you were to run our statistics one year to another, we end up ranking out about the same as we do regardless. But each library was impacted in a different way. So, you know, if you think about the libraries that are in our district, the Lakeside Library, for example, was able to remain open because they typically don't have more than a dozen people in their building at a time. So they didn't have to worry about capacity. At other libraries like Coos Bay and North Bend, we had to be concerned with capacity. And so we offered things like curbside service. And those numbers are not reflected in the state statistics that we are talking about pulling data from to make our calculations. So if you look at the attendance at a smaller library like Lakeside or Dora, you might not see the same fluctuation in attendance as you would if you looked at Coos Bay or North Bend. Part of the reason why I am making a recommendation that we implement this new formula gradually, in addition to it trying to ease in for those who have to take budget cuts, is to give us time to work those pandemic we want to get this going. We want to start. It's time to make this revision. We feel like it would not be a good idea to delay further until we have statistics beyond the COVID period. But in doing our transition incrementally, those statistics have less bearing on a library's funding than they would otherwise. Is that what?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Lori,
Go ahead.
can I just make a comment about the transition plan, the 25-75? Part of the reason, Coos Bay Library is in favor of the 25-75% is being able to ease into it. Every 2 years since I've been here, we've had to eliminate a position because of budgetary issues. I've just had to do another one. If I have to take an even bigger cut the first year, that would be two years in a row, which we can't sustain. That I will have too much of a workload to eliminate that quickly.
Few thoughts. And I know that early on, this board was very concerned about transitioning so that because we knew that there are going to be some libraries that are going to benefit and some libraries that will see a decrease to benefit. And we're trying to be as equitable as possible. And so that was a real concern. And so it's nice to see that we have, plus I like the idea that it allows those COVID statistics to move on through there and we get a better picture. The other thing I wanted to bring up is timeline. It's been, I know we've been working on this for, I want to say 5 years at least.
Going on
And
six.
that's the time that I've been here. I think it's been discussed way before then for a long, long time until we were given the task to do this. So the committee's work is invaluable. I know that the directors, I really appreciate that the directors are together, hearing things, giving feedback and trying to come up with numbers that might work. A question I have is, have we looked at any programming? Did we get to the place where we could look at any numbers in programming to see if it was going to make a significant difference or not? I don't know if we ever got to that spot.
So, with the exception of Coquille, Teresa, the directors were not in favor of including programming in the numbers, and there were a broad variety of reasons for that. Difficulty in accurately counting attendance. Programming has a lot of variability in it, the type of program, the effort required from staff to put on the program, the fact that program attendance, a large percentage of program attendance can be counted in visits to the library. So those were some of the reasons. And I think, Sammy, I don't know, after I finish, you may want to chime in because I think you articulated that pretty clearly in our directors meeting. So you can formulate your thoughts. And we have to remember that we all, this is a number that we're looking at in proportion to other libraries. And I know, Teresa, you and I sat down and looked at what it would be to add in program numbers, or at least some of the program numbers that had been reported to the state library. And it was a very rough exercise. It was not something that we would use to calculate funding. More work would have to be done there. But in my initial look into that, it did not seem like it would make a significant difference because we all do programming. It's proportional, and I'm not sure that it would have the benefit that a library would hope that it would be.
I think the allocation committee actually said that that would be something to look into after this is done. It's like we're trying to get this finished, the transition formula, and then possibly look into programming next. You know, what I'm trying to say is things aren't going to just stop with this. Questions and answers are going to continue in the past. And one of them is on programming.
Yes, that's similar to the discussions that we've had about computer usage.
A couple of years to talk about it.
Yeah, we've discussed the fact that computer usage is a factor that we are including right now, but for many libraries that has drastically changed in the post-COVID way of operating. Much fewer people use our library computers, so it's very reasonable to think that in another 4 or 5 years, we might decide that we want to replace computer usage with a different measurable.
This is off that track, so if you want to finish that track, but.
Did you have anything you wanted to say?
I remember my wise words. So basically, though, we were having a discussion about programming, and even the discussion amongst ourselves, we couldn't agree on what program, what a program is. How do you define it? And how do you count it? And well, what happens if you use somebody else's building, somebody else's bathrooms, they're paying for everything. Is that something we should count? Because it's not using library funds. So we just kind of had this to where we were talking in circles and sort of had the reality of, well, this is the problem with it right here is how do we define, how do we count, equitably? Because like Teresa said, some of us have rooms, some of us don't. Some of our rooms, are only available part of the time. So it's just kind of almost too squishy of a thing to count. But obviously, the more programs you have, though, the more visits you have to your library for the most part. And so it has indirect results to affect the numbers.
The only problem with Coquille and smaller libraries are those people don't come in our library, so we don't get to count them. So the bigger libraries who have a programming room that the patrons come into the library, they're counted. The program attendance is counted as foot traffic, where if all our programs happen off-site, our foot traffic doesn't reflect
So
it.
if you have a program in the big hall, somebody needs to go in and count heads.
We do that. We have
So-
statistics all the way back.
So there you have that.
They're not included in this because they're program attendants and they didn't come into the building.
I thought that the toilet paper roll, I think you said something.
We don't pay for toilet paper.
See, this is where we started.
This is where it started going in a circle.
We are trying to clarify, get an answer to that question
Right.
for the Coquille Library. That question was raised for several of our libraries, Myrtle Point, Dora, Coquille, and that's why in the directors group, when we met last, or maybe time before last, we decided that those directors would go to the state library and ask the state library, because we're trying to find a definition that we all can agree on, a way of counting, a method of counting. And we are trying to rely on the numbers that are submitted either to the state library for the annual report or that are from COHA, our circulation system. And so if the state library says those are attendance at your library, then it gets counted in attendance, even though it is a program in a different room. And they have so far responded that it was attendance or library visits at Dora and at Myrtle Point. So we're waiting to hear on what it is for Coquille.
Right, because we had the discussion also, like, we hold things over at Vengus Park, which we do agree with the city to do, and we pay for, but we don't get to count those. And I mean, those are the ones that bring in 300 and 400 people. Yeah, I'd like to have those numbers, but according to the current
Okay.
rules, I can't have those. So I don't want to drop doing cool things like that. I don't want to, what did you call it?
Teaching
Teaching to the test. I don't want to teach to the test, but at the same time, you know, I mean, this is where you see where our conversation got
Yes.
very hard because we can't, it's just hard. And if we approach it like a scientific experiment with the COHA and the other things, we can repeat those numbers. I mean, we can make those numbers come up the same because it's the same data. Maybe not if somebody's counting this versus not that versus, you know, and then I retire and somebody else comes in and counts it differently. So we want to have something that can be replicated. That 50 years from now, well, I mean, nothing, let's hope it doesn't take another 50 years, but you know, have those very precise instructions down. You count this way, you know, so everybody continues to, or revises it to all agree on another definition. So,
Which is another reason for incrementally applying the formula. It gives us time to correct any errors that might exist in either our method or in our reporting. So if a library director has concerns that in 2021 library visits didn't include things that should have been counted as attendance, that minimizes the impact on your funding, but keeps us moving forward in the process.
Yeah, I believe that was one of the concerns of the county commissioners, that we have a formula that can be continued on regardless of the people involved on the board or main office, ESO, because right now it's really not.
So this formula was designed to approximate the distribution that's currently going to the different libraries right now. So if you use this formula and apply it to prior years, do you get a pretty close match with how that distribution's gone? Where are the differences showing up? Do you know?
So the Bandon Library receives a pretty significant increase in funding. That is propelled by their usage. They have proportionally high usage. Their population proportionally is about the same as it is now in the new calculations, but their usage is proportionally higher, so they receive an increase. The Coos Bay Library is pretty much the same. I think there's a slight decrease in funding, maybe about 3%. The Coquille Library, if the formula were applied straight up, they would have a really significant impact on them. I believe about 35%.
27.
Okay.
Right.
Negative.
Yes.
Negative.
Yes, negative. And that is, influenced heavily by a change in their population, distribution. They previously had been assigned a larger percentage of the county population in their service area. They do have a lower usage rate than Bandon, which is part of that flip, but a big piece of that is the population. Dora, because of their usage, would receive an increase. I believe that's in the range of 20%. And that is almost a direct shift from funding from Powers. Theirs would be a decrease of about 20%. Myrtle Point stays about the same. Lakeside gets a significant increase, I think probably the highest increase out of all the group. And then the North Bend Library would take about an 8% decrease. I could be more precise, but those are the numbers as I recall them. So when I was formulating a transition plan, the directors group felt that a library should not be required to take more than an 8% decrease in a year. So that transition across the 3 years spreads that 35% and across those 3 years so that it's in the range of 7%, 7%, 7%. And it gives, as I said previously, opportunity for statistics to change, because by the time we get to fiscal year 2027, and then of course 2028, when the formula is fully applied, we're still working on those numbers. We don't have them yet.
Anybody else have anything?
I have one more question that this is me not having a math brain, so I'm not looking at you, Bailey. So when you're doing these transition years, fiscal year 2026, 27, and you're looking back at 21, 22, and 23, are you making, think in Myrtle Point here, it's 23 they're closed, or they have been, they're not now, but they have been. Is there and I know there's for a disaster on a different scale, but in this transition, looking back, if Coquille closes or you guys are doing some construction if you're closed, is there some way to account for those?
That is one of the things that the directors have requested that we flesh out. We provide more detail. My notes now say that it's at the months affected could be replaced with data from the same months in the prior year, and that would be at the discretion of the Coos Library Board. And the directors have requested that we be more specific. So that's something that I would love to hear from the board about, you know, what their suggestions would be.
That was my initial thought, is that if they had to close due to construction or something, somehow we carry them through that with prior year.
But it's also helpful to have 3 years in there instead of relying on just one, for instance.
Yes.
Because that really would
And
make
you,
things.
and you do have a disaster clause at the bottom.
We live in Coos County, we have to have a disaster clause, right?
Well, this isn't something that the board needs to take action on today. And just to clarify, when the board, if we get to that place and the board does approve something, then this document goes to each of the cities and to each of the library boards before it is ever moving on to the county commissioners. So just wanted to bring that up. I do think, though, the board, we need to talk about the timeline. The committee has asked for our input on that.
Before we move on, can I say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
So the COVID, Haley just mentioned how it did impact some libraries, but not other libraries. And I know about North Bend and Coquille. And so I would entertain that we could take the 3-year average, the year before and the year after, and add those 2 years together and average them for the middle year. Because the middle year we weren't all consistently taking a gain or a loss. And so I would like to know that.
Well, just to say something, the abandoned library was closed for a year. So I don't know where that stands in your little formula. Are you saying you were closed a lot during the?
I'm saying that we didn't have a director in Coquille, and so the girls just
Oh,
did what they thought.
neither did we.
They did what they thought was best, and
Right.
they did, window pickup, and we can't count that according
Right,
to the
we did
state.
curbside.
They, didn't know that anyone could come in the library, so they didn't, they just handed everybody to them. So we had, in the entire year, we only had 700 people per foot traffic.
We only had curbside and the city abandoned closed the library twice. It was about a year and a half, ago, 2 years.
So I don't think we're ready to move forward to the next step. There's too many factors that we still have not flushed out. So I don't think we're ready to move on. So
I just want to say, if you move a little bit too slow, it's going to be a whole nother year.
gonna say, and we really are in a time crunch to get this beginning of this implemented. But
if the sooner we move, we'll have all of these, well, we'll add that to the next time. We'll add that to the next time. And so the initial distribution will be a lot lower because there's things that we're not able to agree on yet that won't happen until subsequent years. Like the programming, we don't know about that yet. But if we're willing to go forward right now, Coquille's gonna take, it's gonna affect us, but not necessarily other libraries, and then later on, it'll all be evened out. But I think we want to have everything flushed out and even before we move forward, rather than just keep changing things.
So I have the question, how do we move forward? Does the Coos Library Board vote? And if they vote, is it majority rules or is it,
so yes, but
everybody
But
has
it's
to
not
say yes
voting
or
today.
no?
No, it does not have to be unanimous. But I think that the timeline will help clarify okay, what's happening
Okay.
next and what. Well, it's not a vote to happen today, but sometime in the not too far future, we will have a recommendation from the committee that we will need to vote on. So today is just a report of what's been happening and what they're currently looking at. And I know the directors have hashed this over and over and over. But to me, that would be, another question to ask. Can this be done? And perhaps that's already been discussed. I don't know, in the directors meeting. But the people that are in the know are you directors because you live this world. And so your input's valuable.
Well, living in this world, if I only get $400,000 now and I lose 27%, that's 300,000. Everybody knows that that's a big change, and it will completely change the way that Coquille operates their libraries. That's the bottom line.
You're not gonna take 20% all at once.
I realize that, but the dollars that we get will be worth less every single year.
I hear you. I mean, that happens to me in my household.
Can I make a comment or two?
Sure.
Thank you. First of all, it said, the director said, well, they shouldn't take more than 8% hit. We're taking 11.5% per year. Based on if it's 35%, that's 3 years, right? That's not what it is, 35% or the 28.
It's 27.
Okay, so it's 27. So sorry, that's 9%. Director said 8%. That seemed, and one fact you don't have in here is what do the communities contribute to the libraries? We're all tasked, my city and every one of the cities and towns involved here, provide for the maintenance, the operation of the buildings and all that. Is that any kind of factor? We're spending $2.8 million on fixing up the library that our library board has always wanted to have, and our friends in the library board wanted to have. Apparently that's not important. As a city manager, why should I mean, it's all contracted and everything, but why should we do it? If we're gonna be losing 28% of our revenue that goes to the library, so now the city's gotta pick that up. At the same time, we got a county that can't run a jail, So I gotta hire more police officers to deal with all the people that get dropped off there and not booked and released. So, you know, the pressures in each community are different, right? Equitable is a nice statistical term and it sounds nice. You know, I've been working in government for 30 years. And, you know, this going, hey, sorry guys, you just have to, you know, accept that. Then why is the city investing in a library? Leave them where they're at right now, you know, which isn't a great library, but they're really trying hard and they work hard and they do a good job. But none of that seems to matter. It's just like, well, sorry.
Well, that's something to consider. City of Bandon does bookkeeping for the library, period. This plan has been needed for 20 years. Bandon Library has 5 workers and they can't afford to let somebody else go. If they let somebody else go, that's 4 workers. They're gonna either cut hours or close another day. You know, so I think we all can air problems with the way things have been and how they are right now. But we need to move forward. So in 5 years, we'll all be in a better place.
We won't be in a better place 5 years from now. I
Well,
guarantee that. So you can't say in 5 years we're all in
the
a
city of Bandon never gave the library $2 million to build a library.
So I can answer, in the master plan for Coos County Library Board, each city is responsible for maintaining the facility of the library. So in that way, you know, every city does that. And I know when I was on a library board, we would go to the city and say, you know, this isn't part of our budget. This is your responsibility. Now, while that happens within a city, of course, we have no control over, as the library board, the county library board, that's up to each city and their administration and their library staff. But in terms of the expectation and it's actually spelled out in the master plan, that is the expectation or responsibility of each city for their library. So, yeah.
And I'd like to take a moment to clarify the projected loss of funding for Coquille. So yes, if we applied the formula tomorrow to calculate fiscal year 25 funding, yes, there would be a 27% decrease in Coquille's funding. But what we have proposed for the first year would actually result in a 5.34% decrease in Coquille's funding in the first year. And then following that, Coquille's usage statistics are still to be determined. The library usage statistics for every library are still to be determined. And so it is impossible for us to accurately project what an individual library would get. That's part of why I've really cautioned against all of us looking at dollar amounts, because those are just made up numbers, because this is a dynamic formula that changes with how library is used. If we used the same statistics for the year following, if everything across the district stayed totally static and Coquille performed exactly the same way as it did before, at 50%, it would be an additional 5%. So in year 2, the cumulative difference would be 10.67. And then we just get further out from what we can actually predict. And as Teresa said, some of these years at the beginning, the library wasn't functioning as a healthy, well-utilized library. There were issues. I think all of us could articulate or tell you issues that we know of at our own library and reasons why we shouldn't move forward, or why we have issues with certain years, because that's just the reality of working in a library. And so I'm hopeful that in this incremental application, we are able to put as much power as we can in the hands of the individual library to either adjust the way that they're operating. Y'all are making a huge investment in a new facility, and that's going to generate a lot of use for you in a few years, and I recognize that. So that's why hopefully stretching things out, if we can compromise on the application of it, it will give everybody the opportunity to make changes that they want to make, improve their libraries, because that's going to be good for all of us and good for all of our users. But I really want to caution against focusing on that cumulative number. That's the worst case scenario, or that's how I'd like everybody to look at it, if that's the worst case scenario. So I just wanted to clarify that on the statistics, because it is really easy to look at a spreadsheet of numbers and go, whoa, but we really don't have concrete information about what things are going to look like. We're reporting statistics right now to the state library.
So basically that 27%, the only way that that 27% would go into be implemented is if we were to do a static change from old formula right over to new formula. Then Coquille would see that 27%. So Haley's saying is the only one that we can even remotely start to figure would be that first year, and that's using that 25-75 formula, 25 of old, or 75 of old, 25 of new. So the 27 doesn't really break out over the 3 years.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, what more information do we expect to get before the library board can make a decision?
So today, I would like to know from the board members if they have any feedback for me on the formula. Do you feel that it's a good plan to move forward with, to continue working on the issues that we've discussed, but generally something that we think we can move forward with? And then same for the transition plan. We can take any feedback from the board today back to the committee, and that will help us make our final recommendation to the board, which we would hope to get approval on in November, so that then we could start talking with our stakeholders about the one single plan that we hope to be able to get approval on to move forward, which is the timeline.
Did that answer?
I can just say that I know that this has been looked at for, at least 4 or 5 years since I've been on the board. So I really do appreciate what the committee has done. This is the first I've seen of this report. So I'm going to be eager to see the minutes written up really soon so I can review what was said today as well as the report. But I think you're really on track, and I would say continue with what you're doing. And if there's other issues that need to be resolved, then okay. But I think we should be ready to approve this within the next month or 2.
If I could pinpoint the one thing that could be looked at that might make a difference for Coquille, I would recommend that, but I know that programming that would make a difference. That's already been tooled around. Don't know for certain, like you say, if it's going to be based on usage statistics. If I could say, well, okay, we're going to rate cities and their involvement and their support and what they do for libraries on this scale, and everybody's going to get that number. It's not that easy. It's going to be one of those things that they go round and round about. Well, do we count this? Do we count that? Do we count that? It's so hard. But I also recognize that simply having flat statistics from programs don't give the whole picture either. I get that. But at some point we need to move forward, and I think I'm in favor of getting this rolling and continuing for the committee. So I'm speaking for me now, not for the board. That I'm with Francis, that we go ahead, the committee goes ahead and moves forward with this formula. Or comments on the transition formula, I really appreciate. And You know, I appreciated Christine's comment. I'm sorry that didn't quite meet Bandon's needs, but I recognize that, you know, they understand that it would really be for them that they need that to happen. So I think it's a good way to move forward, with that transition, because that also satisfies what we said at the beginning and what the county commissioners were concerned about as well. Wait a minute, committee goes back and do this.
Are you talking about agreeing to the 25, 75, 50, 75, 25? Is that the only thing that you're talking about?
No, I'm agreeing to move forward with this formula.
With the factors.
The factors and the transition program. Those were the committee wanted those two pieces of input from the board.
Is that a motion or do we need a motion?
I don't think we need a motion, but I think they need to hear from more than two of us. And so speak your, mind, don't agree to agree, just whatever you're thinking.
Yeah, I think that you've got a good start here. And I think that that's the direction to go. Until it isn't, I think that we need to bear in mind that this is not what's going to happen in 2025. It's what's going to happen forever for the district. And it's important to make these changes in a way that we're not going to have a disaster 10 years from now. And not that I'll care in 10 years. So I appreciate that you are putting as much thought in this. And will you walk us through again, the stakeholders, do all of them have to approve this before it goes to the city council? And I'm saying the cities at this point.
So I think in most instances, in the discussions that we've had as library directors, most cities function where their director is going to make a recommendation to their library board, who would then in turn make a recommendation to their city council. The city councils do have to approve our annual contract, and this will be part of that annual contract. I do not know how the county commissioners would proceed if a city declined to sign their contract. That becomes a much more complicated legal matter. That's outside of my wheelhouse. I think that, though, I will say, I think it's very important that we consider the long-term ramifications of this process and the transition and a new contract for our district, and that we remember the purpose of our library district and that we exist to serve one base of patrons, one county, one card, and that hopefully we are able to proceed with an attitude of compromise and a focus on that. I think every library will have changes to make. I know personally my library is scheduled, according to my projections, to take a decrease in funding. And so from that perspective, I have to think about how my city is going to respond and what impact that's going to have on my patrons. But I'm also trying to keep in mind that we are a single library district. We are unique and very fortunate to have the stable funding that we have. And I think as a director and a member of this group of folks who works together, it was impressed upon me when I started here, the importance of cooperation and how our library district works and is successful because we all work together. And I hope that we don't lose that in our process. Thank you.
Well, I was on the committee, so.
And so was,
Carol.
yeah, is not here today.
I think sort of the transition process is going to be a key part of this, kind of easing into the new formula. As well as, and it's mentioned in the second page, that the allocation process is reviewed yearly with input from the stakeholders. Because it will take time to, and I assume this is going to be tweaked a bit here and there as things come up. And, obviously we can't predict 4 years down the road how funding and things are going to work. So at least at the beginning of the program, things are at a reasonable level for all the libraries involved. And just keeping an eye on that moving forward for any problems that pop up.
So I actually do have something to say. This formula is probably the 25th, at least, that we looked at. And in the beginning, it was mind-boggling. This is the simplest and the best formula that the group came up with. Coquille and Powers are the only two libraries that are going to be losing a little bit of funding. And the committee actually said that they would try to help Powers by talking to their city hall. And every year, things are going to change. I mean, if you go gung-ho in your programming, then you're going to get more funding. It's not going to be, it's not set in stone, but you have to start somewhere. There's been many formulas where Coquille lost a lot more money. Because that's where the population and statistics goes. When you look at just that information and no more, that's where it goes.
Does that it sounds, Haley, to me like the board is in favor of moving forward this allocation formula and the transition. Yes. Let's look now at this timeline. They wanted feedback on this timeline is reasonable. We're okay with approving this timeline.
And this timeline can also be a working document. I just wanted to bring it to you in case there were any concerns that you had about the steps that we as the committee envisioned us taking.
So your next step is November. Is that workable for you and the committee?
I believe so.
Okay, so according to this, we would have both our December and January board meetings then to work.
Yeah.
Library board meeting.
Library,
Yeah.
our individual library board meetings. Do you also, I'm sorry, do you want cities also in that December, January?
Yes.
Both?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So I make sure I understand it correctly.
Yeah, so the stakeholders would be whoever the individual libraries, so it could be councils, city administration, library boards, would that be where all that falls in? So that's who they're meaning by stakeholders.
Yeah.
I still feel like it's pinch that this actually could be going to the commissioners in February. It's been so long.
Can I ask, did you talk with the library directors and is the December, January work for everybody? Just because not every city council meets twice a month.
We talked about this timeline about a month ago. And at that time, I asked for folks to let me know if they had any concerns with it, and I did not receive any concerns about the timeline.
Because I don't know all the other cities, but I know Myrtle Point's meets the first Monday.
Yeah.
Of the month.
Us too.
Yeah, and then they don't meet unless they have a specific reason. They don't meet again that month, so.
And my library board doesn't meet in December, so
Yeah.
we may see a little bit of fluctuation in that. But hopefully we can get to an additional Coos Library Board meeting in late February, at the latest early March, to get an approval to forward to the county commissioners.
I think it's reasonable. Hopefully, like you say, we may have to tweak it a little bit. It's fast and then we can send it.
So just for clarification, these guys have given you the recommendation to take back to the committee.
Yeah.
And then the committee, do we need to have a CLB meeting in November to
Yes.
kind of get, this is what's set, the CLB agrees with it, it can now go to the stakeholders, correct?
Correct.
And then after the stakeholders, then we'll have another CLB meeting to give the final recommendation to give to the commissioners.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure I got everything in.
You got it.
It's weird to be going that fast now.
I know.
After how many years?
If you'll excuse me,
Any other- oh,
to
yes.
leave now.
Any other, open up for any comments, but before we move on, is there anything else?
Well, I just want to say I appreciate everybody's blood, sweat, tears, grumblings, whatever. I mean, this is not easy. And I think ultimately, as long as our patrons are served, whatever that looks like, as long as we continue to serve them, I think that's the part of it. We want our patrons, and that's ultimately what we're here for, so.
Okay. Next up, we have a new business, and so
Thanks,
it
Amy.
is time for elections. We need to elect a new chair and a co-chair, vice chair. So the floor is open for nominations. I'm not on the nominating. I'm not there.
3 years is enough.
Anybody have a burning desire? Not anybody willing? I would recommend Barbara.
I'll do it, yes.
Okay, anybody else want to vie for the chair position?
Ooh, the fighting breaks out.
Francis? Okay, so, I guess we would need a motion then.
Yeah.
So I move that we elect Barbara as chair of the Coos County Library Board for this next year. When would this start? Remember
I mean, now,
now?
yeah, it's technically
Seems like
July
that's what happened
1st.
to me,
We
like-
just didn't have a July meeting. Yeah.
Hey, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to elect Barbara as the chair. Any further comments? Hey, all those board members in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Assuming you're on board, Francis. Hey, thank you, Barbara. Now we need a vice chair. Which, you just fill in when Barbara isn't able.
Who is it now?
Means Barbara.
Barbara.
There goes that idea, huh?
Last month she did the meeting.
I see.
Adrian, don't you know that position?
It's like my third meeting in this group. It's been spread out, but yeah. I know.
Anybody willing to consider that? Or leave them Adrian? I also know that some of us are getting closer to our term end. That doesn't matter. It's turning out just yet. June. I always thought it was December for some reason.
June.
But it's
And I think we have a
June.
couple in, or at least one.
So we have
June.
Francis. Francis, is this your second term on the board?
No, I think it's my third. I think this is my last term.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. See if you might be interested, but you might not want to be for just a few months.
I'm really overcommitted in a number of organizations, so I'm wondering if there's somebody that is on the board that's not present here today that might be an option.
I would told that would be Carol.
That'd be Carol. She's as bad as you are, Francis.
Carol Mitchin?
Yeah.
Well, I think she would probably be willing to be vice.
Yeah, like some of it. They're
Everybody steps back. And
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose we could ask her, but then pushing it out another
Next month.
month. Come back. Adrian can think about it.
So this term ends this coming June?
The,
Yes, the
Yeah.
chair position goes from July 1st through June 30th.
Okay.
We just didn't meet in July, so.
Elections are.
Went to
free.
October. Yeah, yeah.
so it would end.
So that, I mean, I can do that. Someone did it.
That'd be great.
So,
Okay.
I guess
That's fast.
yes.
nominate Adrian.
I'll second that. Any, so we have a motion to elect Adrian as vice chair and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, thank you, Adrian. He's our vice chair. Excellent. Okay, now we're on to the ESO report.
There was, a sheet for rural that was gonna be voted on.
We actually have a candidate. They haven't went in front of the commissioners yet. They are actually going to be presented at the commissioners meeting tomorrow. So, if they are elected, I will let everybody know. And then Siri interjects all the time. So yes, I'll let the whole board know, welcome them, and then, they'll be present at the next meeting as well.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Now we can go into the ESO report.
All right, so since our last meeting, I replaced my outreach technician, then my ILL technician left, and so now I've replaced my ILL technician. So, but the two ladies that I have in those positions are doing a phenomenal job. Outreach has added quite a bit of new patrons. She loves setting up her little mini libraries in the assisted living facilities, and they love her. So they're just like bringing their friends now. And so she gets quite the group. ILL, she's been with us for maybe a month, 3 weeks to a month. And she's also doing an amazing job. So yes, those are good. Also, we finally received our new courier van. As you can see, there's two out there in the parking lot with Coastline logos on them. We got our large one that we wanted the first time that we ended up getting the smaller one. We got the larger one now. So, we're working on outfitting the cargo space on that, in order for it to be able to take all the 40+ crates of stuff around all the libraries every day. So, and I'm just about done with that. It should be operational next week. And then the old courier van will become my outreach van. So she'll actually be able to take carts full of books into the facilities so that they can actually browse them more like they're in the stacks, as opposed to set up in crates. We kind of have a temporary setup. So, yeah, so for that, ESO is doing great. I have ILL reports for the current fiscal year and the previous fiscal year on there. You can see where it fluctuates, where I have to take over and become the ILL technician again. And then when I actually have staff. So, those are both there for you guys, for information there. And then as far as the outreach stats, these are the ones from last fiscal year. my outreach technician had an issue with creating a new spreadsheet. So we're working on that so that she has all the numbers from this fiscal year so far. She just has to plug them into a spreadsheet. So those aren't actually there. When it comes to the database comparison, there's a couple of pages there. One is our fiscal year to date. I did not include last year's. But this year's is there so far, and breakdown of our different databases. Anywhere from our EBSCO ones that we pay through a single company, and we kind of get a package that adds in different things there. And those are the MyHeritage, which is a genealogy database, Novelist, which integrates with our patrons catalog that gives lots of rating and suggestions on what you would like to read if you like this and things like that. So that's added in there. And then Flipster is our digital magazine collection. We have a pretty good digital magazine collection that you can see gets a lot of use. And then we have several that are provided by the state. Learning Express and Jobs and Career will not be provided by the state after this month. They're dropping that from their program. So that will go, we've discussed it with the directors, and we're going to be adding that. That will come out of the ESO budget to add those in. It provides lots and lots of, it doesn't necessarily show it in the numbers, but it seems like
The number one thing it's great for is resumes. It doesn't charge people. Have you ever tried a free resume thing? You get to the end, oh, it's free until you pay $10 to print it, type thing. This provides a great resume, cover letter thing, and you make an account and it saves it so you could always get to it and always update it. That's the number one. It also has testing, everything from GED testing. There's some nursing tests in there. There's
military entrance.
I mean, all those kind of things.
Yeah, real estate.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff is in there, which.
Medical ones, medical exams.
So it's got a wide variety of things in it.
Is the state bringing on CIS, or is that just the school portion?
That's school.
Yeah, I don't think they're adding anything. They're just gonna be covering Gale for us. And then Mango is our language, our learning a language database, which gets quite a bit of use. Overdrive is our digital catalog, and then Westlaw is a legal database that we added a couple of years ago, and it basically adds all legal, any legal information or forms that you would need in like legal ease, so that the average person can understand different briefs and forms and all that. And that is also an important thing that we've finally been able to add, that we've been struggling to find a database that would provide those, mainly the forms, for our patrons. So those are the.
Stacy,
go ahead.
could you put this on the screen while you're talking about it, please?
Okay, let's see here. Yes, I can. Let me pull up the agenda and pull it off of that. Here.
This moment.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, let's
That's where I'm like,
go. Opened it. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so the digital contact comparison, I'll pull it up here. Maybe. Just thinking. Okay. Can you guys see that now?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, the first column over here is the year to date that I've been discussing. There are numbers in there for July, August, and September broken out, which is also in that packet. But yeah, those are the 4 that we're working off of right now. And then Westlaw's hidden down at the bottom. Got too many pop-ups here. So. And then there's that last one, that Westlaw database. Then, did you have any questions about it, Francis?
No, it was just, I thought it would be more helpful as you were talking about it to be able to see
Sure.
it on the screen.
Let me get back over to the agenda and then I will show you, the last thing for the ESO report is our current budget. So go over that. So I'll pull that up on the screen as well. All right. So the balance sheet is the last part of that packet. And then make it bigger so you guys can actually see it up there. So this is the ESO budget so far for this year. This is through August 31st. So just the first 2 months. And we are 17% of our fiscal year is elapsed. Come down here to eventually there's our personnel and our materials and service. It is a little high right now. My contractual is way over and my office supplies is way over, but that is not accurate.
Well, contractual, you probably paid a lot of them up front.
I do pay all my contractuals up front, so that is why that is like that. My office supplies.
You bought too many pencils?
Oh, no, it wasn't the pencils. It was our new library cards. We had a huge expense that jumped our office supply budget from 3,000 to 13,000 this year. And that was to order new library cards. We order our library cards. The last time we ordered them was 2015. So we buy them in a large bulk so that we get a huge discount. And so we have them for years and years to come. But that's why that is so high. We're actually still quite a bit below, and I will probably use next to nothing for the rest of that. So that'll probably be similar to where that is. And our library books and materials, we have been using, we've had a lot of, we use this budget for the digital library collection, and we've had a lot more use with our digital for some reason. Our digital audiobooks usage has quadrupled. It's so much more. So I'm working on, there's several different lending models for us to receive those digital books. So I'm working on transitioning them from certain ones from the more expensive over to the less expensive. So that will all end up balancing out by the end of the year. But we normally, it's called cost per cert, and that's our most expensive model, but it's the way that we can get the most books, most different titles into our patrons' hands or devices. So we used to only spend $700-800 a month on that. The last 3-4 months, it has been closer to 2,000. That's how many more users we have requesting those items. So there's a way for me to transition those from the cost per cert to owning certain titles, or if it's way too expensive, dropping certain titles. So weeding them out. So that's what I've been in the process of doing now. So we will not exceed that budget for that.
So these are your Libby library to go.
These are Libby library to go. Yep.
I would say I appreciate that because 3 of mine said your library has purchased the holds.
Yes, I've been trying, and they switched one of their lending models too. So instead of being able to recommend things, now it's a different path. So it's been a lot of change for them. and apparently our patrons too, because they have exploded with digital content
Yeah.
usage. So that's why that one's high too. So it's showing that we're over by quite a bit, 17 over, and this is showing 43%. But it will all balance out towards the end. And beginning of the year is a lot higher also because we pay all of our most of our contractuals annually. So I pay them all at the beginning of the fiscal year. So that also is, a lot of those are high ticket items, 5 to 10, some of them 25 to $30,000 of that contractual budget that's all paid out at the beginning. So does anybody have any questions about any of that?
Oh, when you say you bought library cards, is that the coastline?
Yeah, so the little white cards,
Right.
your library card that you
Yes.
take in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we replaced them and it was actually easier for us to, well, not easier. The technology has advanced a lot since 2015. So we were actually able to get pictures on them instead of just white cards with the library logo. So we actually have 3 different designs. It was no more expensive to do 3 designs as opposed to just white with the logo. So people will kind of have a choice now. It's 2 kind of more everybody cards, and then 1 card is more kitschy, little cartoony for kids. And anybody can choose any of the cards they want, but we thought that would kind of promote, more fun, exciting cards.
So I'm really bad at what some things mean.
Sure.
What is contractual? What is in
A
contractual?
lot. So any of our databases that we pay, pretty much any vendor that we contract to give us services goes in there. So technology, yeah, our Office 365 falls into that. What was that?
Is that where Executech comes from?
Part of it. So Executech is broken out into 2 different categories. All of our Office 365 and things like that come out of contractual because they're providing a system for us instead of a service to us. And then we also have them down under our equipment maintenance contract, which is where all of their tech service comes in that provides all that for us. So yeah, there is a lot. And at the top of my head, I'm trying to think
That
of
would be the database.
all our databases.
That's the big one, our databases, and Executech is most of it.
Yeah.
Paying for Bywater to manage co-op.
That's under equipment
Oh, you
contract.
put that in.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to think what other.
Yeah, there's a
Maybe
lot of,
databases.
that's probably my most used category.
Backstage.
Okay, thank you.
They're not good.
Yeah, Backstage would be under contractual. Anything else for regarding the budget? All right, ESO is done.
Your director's reports. So, get my notes. Let's just start, we're gonna start online. And I'm working from the bottom of my list up. I'm gonna start with Joni.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, well, Powers received the PLA Digital Learning Workshop grant for $6,000, so we're going to be working on that real soon. We finished our summer reading program, which went really well, and our summer meals. And we no longer have a police officer again. But other than that, everything is going well.
Thank you. How about Cheryl, Lakeside?
She might have got off.
Okay. Betty wasn't here today either, right?
I don't know, but Lakeside, I'm gonna promote for them. They're having like some kind of witches night for adults coming up that looks really cool. So.
Okay, Christine, Brandon.
Things are going good. We've had COVID's kind of swept through the staff. That's why I'm actually here today and not with you because I didn't want to expose anybody to COVID. But we're working through it. Just happy to see more programming going on. Some growth in that area is good. It was a weak spot for us. And then we also received the PLA Digital Learn grant as well. So that helped us get some new public computers, which we were really needing that. They were getting really old and it was just time to get some new ones. So that's been really helpful. So other than that, pretty normal.
Thank you. Teresa?
Renovation begins next week on our new building, so we're real excited about that. We have no asbestos in our building. That was taken care of a couple weeks ago. We are busy with programs. We took a 2-week pause after summer. Now we're busy in the fall and that's going really well. And we changed our Saturday hours from 12 to 5 to 10 to 2.
And Sammy?
Well, we lived through summer reading. Moving into our fall programming, we're having our foundation fundraiser on November 4th. If anybody wants to eat, drink, and get crazy in the library at night. Other than that, I do have to announce this. Pam, who was our longest forever 38-year employee, finally retired last week. She is allowed 1 week off. And then she's coming back as a contractor for us because we are not done with her yet. So,
She's the cataloger.
yes, she was our cataloger. So she has a few more projects she's not allowed to get away with. But yeah, it'll be a big loss. She had a lot of institutional knowledge that went with her. So I still need her home phone number so I can call her. So, but that's, it's, we'll adapt.
Great.
And then you had Amy as well.
Amy, Amy, I missed, okay. Twice in a row. I'm fired.
That's okay. I'm new. I've only been here. It'll be a year tomorrow. Yeah.
Nice. Yay.
Yay, congrats.
It'll be a year tomorrow. Okay, so also tomorrow, the books will be going back in this library starting tomorrow. Today they are making sure all of the shelves are firmly affixed to the walls, floor, ceiling, each other, staff, whatever, to hold them upright. I'm a little nervous because I left 2 shelves unattended over the weekend when no one was in the building, and I came back to one of them fallen over inexplicably. No one was hurt and the shelf has survived and nothing was damaged, but it's like, how did you fall over? You're a steel shelf with feet. I don't get it. So I will never know. Maybe I've finally found the ghost. I've been trying. So also we'll have new hours. So starting the beginning of November, we'll be open 10 to 6 Monday through Thursday and 1 to 5 Friday and Saturday. That adds a whole day's worth of hours to Myrtle Point Library. So, and I promise there'll be a grand opening thing, a real party with music, live music and all kinds of jazz. But it's probably going to be in November because I got to get the books in here. So,
Okay. Big job. Thank you, Amy. And my apologies again. Okay, so that brings us to the end. Next meeting, watch for an email for a November meeting. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for going through this. Thank you to all of you for coming today.
So the next meeting, you won't be either.
No, I will still be, I'm actually going to be out. I'll probably be online.
Oh,
But I'll still be on board. Okay. 25.
oh,